excited. The next session we have planned here is actually a panel discussion. So we have Melanie Hallett, Steve McDougall, Eileen Noss, and Jeff Turner, as well as Chloe Luckett. And we're going to be talking about social prescribing, creative solutions for gaps in care. So everybody welcome the panel for today.
All right. Well, I feel like Marley kind of said what I was going to say as an intro. Thank you very much for showing up, for making the time and space. Glad to be here with a bunch of folks. We have kind of a mix of both survivors and caregivers for survivors of brain injuries, concussion and stroke, kind of a mixed bag of things. And like Marley said, everyone here, I'm sure, has an experience in this of kind of post-injury, suddenly you realize, oh, there's a big gap going on. There's a lot that we don't know about what we're supposed to do next. And so that's what these folks are going to talk about, the creative solutions that they've found on the journey through their management of recovery and kind of getting where they want to be and doing the things that they want to do. Who would like to start it off? I won't call on you, Melanie. Steve? Just started off. Great. And you have to talk quite close to the mic.
Okay. Hello, my name is Steve McDougall. I had a stroke pretty much exactly 2 years ago, so a 2-year anniversary, November 6th it was. I forget what today is, but so November 6th, 21, I got back from a business trip. I went for a spin bike ride early on a Saturday morning, which was pretty normal for me. I went to get a shower afterwards. I wasn't feeling too well. I was almost feeling like I was going to be sick, but still feeling, okay. And all of a sudden, my right side collapsed on me. I fell to the ground. My left side was trying to keep me up, but it quickly lost energy and control from the rest of my body. And I can remember saying to my wife, "Oh boy, I didn't say oh boy, but it was other words." I said, "I'm having a stroke." I said, "I'm having a stroke," and from there, and the realization that I was having a stroke started what is now a two-year pilgrimage through recovery, which continues today. I went to the hospital. I got zoomed into emergency. I basically lost consciousness, lost control of my body. For about a week, I then started to remember what I went through, and spent about a month in emergency, not an emergency, in the hospital, in 2 months in recovery at the hospital. So I'm going to focus on what I found in my journey that helped me recover and what I learned along the way. I would break my recovery into kind of the time I spent in the hospital through to kind of the first 12 months recovering from the stroke, and then the second 12 months. So let me just break it down there. The folks at the hospital were wonderful. Just a second. They were wonderful, and they helped me regain a lot of my basic movement and basic physical activities, but there's a big mental piece here too of understanding what has just happened and what impact that's going to have on you and on your family in the short term and the long term. The second part was after leaving the hospital and trying to look at ongoing care through Health Nova Scotia and the transition from Health Nova Scotia to whatever the private care was going to be. And by this point, I hadn't really figured that out. And then the third piece is I found there was a distinction between the first year, which was just getting my feet back under me and understanding what happened and what I'm going to do from there. The second year then was actively pursuing recovery. For me, it was through private organizations, which I'll touch on in a minute. How much time do I have in it? Yeah, I'm good. So I transitioned as an outpatient in Health Nova Scotia, and I held on to their skirt for as long as I could because they were good at what they did, and they helped me recover in a big way and get ready for going back into that big bad old world out there. So the 3 months in the hospital and then the 9 months that made up my first year was really, I felt there was no need to try and go to some fancy recovery stuff or take some voodoo magic that was going to make me better, because I was really still in the basic recovery of learning how to get my body to react and my emotions to react, and start getting back to close to a normal life. And so that was more or less supported by Nova Scotia Health as an inpatient, then an outpatient, and then start trying a few different options from the private sector. I didn't have any secondary health insurance, so it was all my cost, which wasn't an issue. Don't get me wrong, but the planning of my life didn't include having a stroke, and I didn't expect to have to look after that. The second year was a few different things. I looked at and secured and tried some support in the Nova Scotia area, which was good, but I wanted to make sure I was giving myself the best chance of success that I could. I tried some private care in Vancouver, which proved to be very good. I secured that help through a good friend who said, "Why don't you give these guys a call? I know of them professionally, and they've got a great reputation." So I turned to them and started to realize that Nova Scotia doesn't have the extent of care that some of the other provinces do. So I went out to Vancouver after speaking to them on the phone for a while. I went out there with the plan to spend a week with them. I ended up spending 2 weeks with them. Did some intense physiotherapy and started to set some goals. And when I left their office, after 2 weeks, I had a game plan to then follow up with Zoom-based interaction and with their help, do my own support to continue the treatment. So that ended up being, I think, 3 times a week physiotherapy over Zoom, down to 2, down to 1. And then started realizing, there's some commonality. I was starting to understand this physiotherapy, get a set of exercises to do, and when they get easy, get another set of exercises to do. That quite honestly, I found that there isn't much mystique in it. It's like that. You get the help of a professional, you figure out what you got to do, you do it till it gets easy, and then you figure out some new exercises to do. And I've followed that philosophy through to today, and will for for the coming years, I would say. I also got some support in a few different places in Houston just to see what was going on. Didn't get a sense that there was a lot extra to offer there, but I did then get some support in Orlando, Florida, on a lady that I met on YouTube who has a ton of videos and expertise in stroke recovery and learning how to walk, learning how to run, learning how to stand up. I'm saying in the wrong order. Basically, learn how to stand up, learn how to walk, learn how to run. And I'm in the middle of kind of some of that now, a mix between support from Orlando and my own, standing up, taking ownership of my recovery, setting the path, knowing when I got to change it up, when things are getting too easy, and also staying at it with enthusiasm. That started from the first time I opened my my eyes after the stroke, through to today. Through to today, I still maintain that enthusiasm level for getting better, and you can't lose that enthusiasm because you can keep getting better, and you should never give up, because there's always more juice in the jar. There's always more in there that you can get out of your body, and you'll find that that if you keep going for it, the result will always be there. So it will diminish. Don't get me wrong. For me, it diminished, but I was ready for that. I knew it was going to get less, but it's still there, and it's still there till this day. And keep fighting, I guess, is my big message, and stay enthusiastic and stay happy. That's all I have. I didn't mention the name of any of the places that I've used, but if you're interested in finding out anything more specific, I'm more than happy to share with you what I've done.
Thank you very much, Steve. Wow, that's powerful. It really resonated with me, you talking about there's always more juice in the jar. And when things start to get easy, that's not when you stop. You keep going. It gets a little harder. I think it can be easy coming from the place as a survivor myself. I think it can be easy you become complacent. You start to fall into the role of playing patient long after you probably don't need to anymore, because that's what you know, and you're looking for things to get easier, so why make it harder? Yeah, but I really commend you. I feel like that's great advice. Thank you. All right, why don't we change it up? We have another survivor and we have 2 caregivers. So just in honor of kind of changing it up, I'm gonna skip over you, Jeff. We'll come back to you. And please welcome Eileen. Are you comfortable going next? Fabulous. Please welcome Eileen. And you have to speak
Kind of close to the mic like this. I feel like I should sing, but you don't want that to happen. Nice, eh? I will sign autographs later if you want the picture. Hi, my name is Eileen Noss. My husband Charles had a stroke 12 years ago now. I have notes because I don't remember things like I used to. It was in September 2012, so yeah, almost 12 years ago. Before that, we were an interesting couple because I was very independent and he was very independent. I worked for the Red Cross at that time, so I was traveling across Atlantic Canada. And he was and is a chartered accountant, and he had his own firm, and he was working with that. On that morning, he was going on a golf tournament. And he came back in. I thought, that's weird. Why is he home? I had plans. But he walked through the door, and he said, I'm having a stroke. And for the first time in 40 years, the man was right. Okay. Luckily, we had, working for Red Cross, I had forced him to take a first aid course. So he was pretty quick to recognize what was happening to him. Unfortunately, what we did not know when he went to the hospital was that he had had a TIA 2 days before, which is, most people call it a mini stroke. So because he had that, he wasn't able to take the, I call it the Roto-Rooter drug. I know that's not what it's called, but the drug that they can give you that will lessen and break up the clot faster. So he wasn't able to have that because he didn't complain about anything, and that's the way it was. We used to love to travel. We used to loved cruising. We haven't figured out how to do that yet, but I would love to be able to figure it out. He loved swimming, and he loved playing guitar, and he loved work. So he was in the hospital. It was tough. He was 3 months in the VG, and then 4 months in rehab. Okay, I tell people that during that time, I had 2 men in my life, Ben and Jerry. And it was, I did not take care of myself, and I still don't take care of myself, and I still love Ben and Jerry ice cream. When I can remember driving home after the first couple of days, because Charles had a brain stem stroke, which has a 5% survival rate. And it's amazing where your mind goes, because I can remember pulling into the garage and looking at his car and saying, oh my God, we're gonna have to sell his car. And my daughter looked at me like I was nuts, but for some reason at that moment in time, that was really important to me. Now I look back on it and go, oh my God, if you only had known what was going to come. Okay, when he was in the hospital is not the real world. The hospital was really, really good, but it did nothing to prepare me for what was going to happen to me. Okay, and I was terrified. He was allowed weekend passes. I was terrified. I had no idea what I was going to do with this man when he came home on the weekend. But luckily, I knew some resources were out there. Because I had worked for the Red Cross, I knew they had a hospital bed loan program. Do you know they have that? Pardon me? Hospital bed loan program. So that if you know somebody who's coming home and requires a hospital bed, you can contact the Red Cross. They do have other resources as well, but I do know they have that one. And luckily, like I say, I worked for them, so I knew, so we were able to have all that ready. And I had people who were helping me rearrange the house, because you don't realize what has to happen to your house until somebody's coming home and you're going, oh my God, he can't get through the door, or I can't lift him onto the toilet or whatever. So it's people, there's things that you have to learn really fast. Okay. Continuing care at that time had something called, I think it's called Home First. Has anybody else heard of that? It was, they provided caregiver for 3 months, first 3 months he was home. So to help us to adjust to it, and that was absolutely fabulous. That was such a big help for me, because I was still working at that time. I'm still working. And this individual was taking care of him, and she would be teaching me what I was supposed to do when she wasn't there. Okay, but only for a few months. And then at the end of that, then you have to try to find a paid caregiver. And I don't know if anybody has gone through that experience in this room or not. It is horrible. There is no other way to, all of a sudden you're hiring people for the person that you love maybe most in the world, and you're going to be leaving them there, and you have no experience. You have no idea what to look for. Luckily, we were able to find a family friend who knew a friend who was fabulous, and she was wonderful. The other thing that I'll mention here is Caregivers Nova Scotia also has, they're up there, they have their caregivers handbook, and that also helps in the hiring process of a caregiver, which was really helpful. Okay, the things that you don't think about how it's going to affect your relationship as a couple. Okay, because all of a sudden, the relationship has changed. You know, you're a caregiver. It just breaks, it's still love, but it's still husband and wife. I don't know exactly what I'm trying to say, but the dynamic has changed. Okay, this was the person more than likely who was a partner and was helping you do anything, and Charles was a chartered accountant, so I knew nothing about accounting. It was like, oh dear God, you know, where were the bank accounts, that type of stuff. That would be advice that I would give to everybody, whether it's the husband or the wife or the partner, whoever it is. Know what's going on in your life, know your finances, because I was totally lost. Luckily, I have a son who is a financial geek, and he was able to take over and help me, but no idea what to do. So make sure you know that. The other thing that I noticed when we were in the hospital is he was going into neurointensive care, and I don't know if anybody has been through neurointensive care. It is one of the most depressing places in the world, because a lot of times it's young people who were in some type of motor vehicle accident and they have a traumatic brain injury. And things like power of attorney, all of those things that we just make assumptions for. So once again, I was lucky. Charles's best friend was a lawyer, and we got that all taken care of. But all of this is coming at a time where you just want to curl up in a ball and cry. So you have to find somebody that's going to hold you up. And I was lucky. We had a great family for that. It's been 12 years, and I still feel grief. There are times that I look and I say, okay, how am I going to get out of bed this morning? We have a grandson, and that has shifted a lot of our focus. And it's okay, but Charles's goal now is, as you can see, he's in a chair, is he wants to get his right arm moving so that he can hug his grandson. And those are the things that still tug at your heartstrings. The other place that I went and I got some resources from was from the March of Dimes website. And Brain Injury Nova Scotia have also provided lots of information. The one thing that I did discover when I was going through all this was that I wasn't the only person in the world going through this. The resources are out there. No one's going to knock on your door and say, here, Eileen, here they are. Congratulations, this is everything you need to do. You have to be the advocate for yourself and for your loved one, because if not, nothing will get done, okay? What did I like? There's also a checklist on the March of Dimes website to how to take, to consider when you become a caregiver, and once again, Caregivers Nova Scotia has that. I looked at it, it's a great checklist, but the one advice I'd give to caregivers, one thing at a time, okay? Don't decide today, okay, I'm going to start eating better, I'm going to start working out, I'm going to sleep more, because that's what the checklist tells me to do. One foot in front of the other, one thing at a time, so you can celebrate your small victories along the way, because there will be small victories and there will be setbacks. And as a caregiver too, we put up this facade that we have to be strong for everybody. We have to be strong for our kids. We have to be strong for our relatives. We have to be strong for everybody. But sometimes it's good not to be strong. It's good to just cry. Find somebody and find somewhere and just have a drink of wine if you're so inclined. Have a bottle of wine if you're so inclined. And then just get on with it. You understand what I'm saying, don't you? Yeah, I can see you nodding your head there. The other thing that I found was one of my pet peeves right now is home care providers, caregivers in Nova Scotia are atrociously paid. And I have been fighting with that tooth and nail because it's one of those things you get what you pay for. All right? And your caregiver, our caregiver, for instance, is there from 7:30 in the morning till 4:30 in the afternoon. Okay, this is this man's full-time job, and the government was paying him $17 an hour. Okay, so because as you can obviously tell, I'm not the type of person just to sit back and say, oh, thank you very much, kick me in the other cheek. I decided that I was going to start advocating and went after MLA, and he went fighting for us, so we managed to get a raise. But you have to do it for yourself because no one's going to knock at the door and say, here's more money. Get knowledgeable about what's out there. There are there are a few organizations that have the information. You just have to go and find it. And the way that I approached everything was that I'm not the only person in the world who's going through this. We live in a world that's connected in various different ways. Go and find help. I can remember an instance, my daughter is diabetic, and she was in the Dominican Republic, and her insulin pump stopped working. She's crying to me, and I'm going like, okay, I'm in Nova Scotia, you're in the Dominican Republic. And then we just talked, and guess what? There are people in the Dominican Republic who are diabetic, so you can probably get the stuff you want. So then, that's the same thing I do with Charles, okay? For instance, I said Charles loves golf. He went online and he found it, and we had it at the 89. We call it the golf gun. And what it is, it's a golf driver, that has a trigger that releases CO2, maybe? And anyway, it's like a jet, and it shoots it out over the way. So he still plays golf, okay? And he loves the guitar. We searched and we found, I call him the one-man band. You remember the old one-man band when they did this? Well, he strums with his foot. So it's out there. All of us here have little pieces of information, and these organizations are trying to work to get us all together, the caregivers and the survivors, and figure out, okay, let's have the best quality of life that we can have under these circumstances. And I think that's my spiel. Oh, I did say it's okay to cry. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Eileen. I know there's a lot of caregivers in the room, but I can't imagine, how much courage it takes to just get up every day and keep doing that. So, my dad had a surgery a few years ago, and I had to clip his toenails twice. Yeah, I thought it was the worst day of my life. So I can't imagine how beyond and above that you go every day to do that. Not just the clipping the toenails, I mean. Please welcome next Jeff Turner beside me. Take it away, Jeff.
Thank you very much, Chloe. Eileen and Steve, you've both covered a lot, but I'll tell you a little bit about myself. So I'm Jeff Turner from Enfield, Nova Scotia. I suffered a stroke on February 22nd, 2022, so about 21 months ago now. I woke up first thing in the morning like normal, getting ready to go to work, so it was about 6 a.m., and I had a really bad headache, and I found I couldn't quite sit up out of the bed. I ended up rolling to my left side to get down onto the floor, and when I got on the floor, it was almost like a table that only had two legs, and I kind of rolled right over on the ground. Still at that moment, I didn't really realize there was anything severely wrong. Getting up, I had knocked over the bedside table. I tried to reach for a bottle of Advil because I just thought I had a really bad migraine headache. I kept dropping the bottle on the ground. I somehow managed to get myself up the stairs into the kitchen, just trying to go about my normal day. It turned out I had a normal symptom of a right side stroke, which is neglect. So my brain was ignoring everything that was wrong on the left side of my body, and I was just trying to go about my day as normal. I didn't realize that my foot was dragging and I was rolling over on my ankle, or that my face was drooped, or that my left arm really wasn't working very well. I had reached into the cupboard to try and get a coffee mug, dropped it on the floor and broke it. Eventually some loved ones came out and took one look at me and said, "Oh my God, like there's something wrong with you." So they had called 911. I was taken by ambulance from Enfield to the Cobequid in Sackville, where I spent the majority of the day without anybody really telling me what was going on. I had done a CT scan and some ultrasounds on my neck, and then by about 9 o'clock that evening, they were taking me by ambulance into the QE2. So I spent about 2 hours in emergency there, and then a neurologist came in and said, "Yeah, we're moving you up to the neurology department. We're just waiting for a bed." And even then, knowing that there was something wrong, I didn't know what it was. And anyway, he took me upstairs. They did more tests, and in the morning, about 8 doctors came in, stood around my bed, and told me I was having a stroke. That was shocking news to me, and it was even more shocking when the doctor on the left side started speaking, and it scared me. I had to look over because I didn't see her. I didn't know she was there. My brain, again, was just ignoring everything on the left side. So it was jaw-dropping, to say the least, to have experienced that. Like Steve, the people in the hospital were fantastic. I spent the next 10 days at the QE2 on the neurology department. There I did get to meet with some physiotherapists and some occupational therapists, and they managed to get me back on my feet and walking around. I had the sticky socks so that I didn't slip, and was able to do some laps around the neurology department. But a lot of the tests that they were doing were really to determine whether or not I needed to be admitted to the rehab facility as an inpatient, or whether I could be sent home and do outpatient appointments with the rehab facility. Fortunately, as it turned out, I was able to go home. That was a big thing for my mental health. So after 10 days, I was sent home, and I went into the rehab facility twice a week for 2-hour sessions. And there, I learned a lot about what I needed to do to get back as much of my physical issues that had diminished as I could. Like Steve, I quickly learned that I'm going to have to continue to challenge myself. So I'd not only do the exercises at the rehab facility, I would come home. I had an app that I could run through all of the exercises that they had me doing. And then in addition to that, I knew that I had to kind of self-advocate and continue to challenge myself. So I'd be looking on YouTube for different exercise programs and exercises that I could do to continually challenge myself as I was able to complete the things that the rehab facility was getting me to do. So, once walking in a straight line and turning my head side to side, I was able to do that. I started doing more challenging things like walking in a straight line while bouncing a tennis ball on the ground and catching it with my affected hand, or walking in a straight line and bouncing the ball, tossing it up in the air, and then tossing it from hand to hand. So things progressed like that. I was doing simple exercises like sitting down and then standing up. I would change that to sitting down and then standing up and then going up on my tiptoes. I was practicing standing on one foot for 30 seconds, which took me a while to get, especially on my left foot. But eventually, I had seen a video online about stroke survivors, and it was talking about the challenges of not being able to, put your pants on in the dark in the morning. And I realized that, you've got three main things that were controlling your balance: the sensation on the bottom of your foot, your inner ear, and your visual acuity. And once I took away my vision, I could not balance. It was almost like the world fell out beneath my feet. So I was standing on one foot. I was able to do it for 30 seconds. As soon as I closed my eyes, that was gone. So that became the next challenge for my standing on one foot exercises, was to do it with my eyes closed. And I would continually challenge that. So eventually I got a foam balance pad, and that's what I would start to do my exercises on. And then the foam balance pad turned into a Bosu ball. And I'd do it on either side of the Bosu ball. So those things that I had to kind of learn on my own were a huge benefit to getting my physical condition back. Aside from that, I also, was suffering a bit mentally. So, prior to my stroke, I was relatively young. I was 44 years old. I was in good physical condition. I had no prior medical conditions, no risk factors for a stroke. So, I was thinking, like, how could this have happened to me, and why? And I was thinking of all the things that I was doing just, days before. I was in charge of a multi-million-dollar company. I was playing hockey 2 times a week. I was riding motorcycles. I was doing backcountry hiking expeditions throughout Canada. And I was wondering, am I ever going to be able to do any of these things again? Will I be able to drive a car again? Will I be able to go back to any kind of work again? Those things were all uncertain to me in those early days. And one of the big things that got me through, and nobody was able to point me in these directions. Like Eileen said, you've got to be your own self-advocate. And nobody's going to come knocking on your door and saying, here's this, here's that, try this, try that. You really had to start digging and looking. And one of the first things I found was Chloe's podcast, which had another stroke survivor who had been on an international trip. She was young. So that immediately told me I'm not alone. I'm not the only one who's gone through this or is going through this or is ever going to go through this. I'm just one of many. And people get through it, so can you. From there, I saw the entire buy-in site and started joining weekly coffee chats with other, ABI survivors. And that peer group, and other peer groups. So I also joined the March of Dimes Canada, a Young Stroke Survivors Network. And through those two groups, the peer support that I got and the ideas and suggestions that I got from those people were key in my recovery. And, some of the things were very simple, like how to navigate going to a high sensory environment like the grocery store. People suggesting, go early in the morning or go late in the evening when it's not quite as busy. Make sure that you get a cart, so you have something to hold on to. Those things were big benefits for me. So strategies to deal with those situations, and also strategies for dealing with things like fatigue. That was a huge issue for me, and still is. So managing fatigue. I started out, I was taking naps. Then it was, you've got to make sure that you plan your day and stick to your scheduled, rest periods throughout the day, or else you're going to kind of empty the tank. And once you empty the tank, it can take you a whole nother day to refill it again. So I would start planning, minute by minute throughout my day when I was going to do exercises, when I was going to do word puzzles or crosswords or Sudokus or brain teasers to keep my mental acuity. and when I was going to take those rest periods. And eventually I learned, napping is kind of counterproductive for me because if I sleep too much throughout the day, I'm not going to sleep well at night. And then my next day is not such a great day. So then I, talked to people in those peer groups, and they suggested meditation, and listening to music, binaural beats, these types of things, which started to work for me. And then breathing exercises, so 4-square breathing and focusing on diaphragm breathing. And those became my rest period, which really helped me throughout my day. And another big thing for me, again, my mental condition. So, I was focusing a lot on the things that I had lost. It was almost like a loss of self that I was grieving. And I had joined a wellness program called Nourish through Byans. And the facilitator there one day, it was probably 3 weeks into the program, said to me, Jeff, you're comparing yourself constantly to the pre-stroke version of yourself. Why don't you, as a change, think about, what it was like being in that hospital bed when you first found out that you're having a stroke. And to think back, I was laying in this bed in the hospital. I couldn't sit up. I couldn't roll over. I couldn't swallow. They wouldn't let me drink liquid or eat solid food. So everything was pureed food. I could only have liquid by IV because they didn't want me to aspirate in my lungs. I couldn't use the bathroom on my own. That was the lowest point of my life, and it was a real paradigm shift for me to be able to think back to that guy, and compare my progress. It actually gave me a big sense of pride. I've actually come a long, long way, despite not being able to do everything that I could do prior to the stroke. I have moved forward, and that progress is what keeps you going and keeps you motivated. And there's always room to continue to grow. So, today I can say, I'm back to work. I've been working for 15 months now. The same role that I had pre-stroke, same level of responsibilities. Nobody gives me a pass. I was given permission by the neurologist to ride my motorcycles again this summer, so I got about 3,000 kilometers this summer on those. I'm back playing hockey. I'm nowhere near as good as I used to be. My left hand, I can't really control the puck with one hand all that well, but I'm out there, which gives me more room for improvement and goals to make, to strive towards. So like Steve, I say, never give up. Keep going, stay positive, strive for progress, not perfection. You're not going to get there in one day, but be mindful of the things that you have achieved and celebrate those wins as you go.
Thank you very much, Jeff. So many similarities between your and Steve's story. So courageous. I feel like just the mourning that sense of yourself. You're saying the pre-stroke Jeff, the pre-stroke Steve. I think it's so easy to compare yourself to the old you and always be striving to get back to that. So I think it takes a lot, especially on those days when you wake up and it just feels unfair. It's like you said, there was no reason for it to happen. So to every day keep going and to keep on challenging yourself on top of that, yeah, it takes a lot. Please welcome, last but certainly not least, Melanie.
Thank you. Well, my journey is with my adopted daughter. She suffered a traumatic brain injury. And as a result of that, she's left with cerebral palsy, and she's nonverbal. And we've been doing this for 11 years. And first of all, I'll show you this picture. And the reason I picked this picture is because along the way, if I hadn't advocated the way I have, and I've met some really wonderful people, I've made great relationships. Some may not like me, but advocating, if I hadn't have advocated for the services and supports to be in place, this little girl wouldn't be 8 feet away from her wheelchair. She'd still be sitting in it. And I get emotional, and my biggest thing with dealing with her is the education of the professionals that I deal with. Not a lot of professionals. I come from a rural area, so some of our PTs and our OTs and services like that don't deal with children enough to be able to help me. They do the best they can, but I wish that there was more education put in place for people that have suffered brain injury. Because they'll ask me, what are my goals? And it's like, this is my first child with these injuries. I don't know. I don't know what the goals are. And that's what I look forward to for the professionals. The IWK for us has been extremely wonderful. And I've met a lot of strangers. I have an accessible vehicle. I don't know how many people I've gone up to say, like, where did you get this? Where did you get that? So sometimes the strangers has become, my friends, because I'm always asking, where's this and where's that? Because I have to look at my daughter in 2 years' time. How am I going to get here in 3 years' time? And some of the avenues has been really tough. Some has been really great. My daughter was in public school, did great. Anyway, there was, circumstances behind her control. She's now homeschooled. APSI was a very important service in our journey with her vision, and because the public school system isn't in her best interest right now, that service is no longer available to her, so I really miss that service. It's my journey, unlike surviving the stroke, is I don't know sometimes where to go, how to help her, and her being a child, there's not a lot of stuff out there, and it's guesswork, and making friends, making enemies, and like and all my notes is advocate, because I think I look after her and I write emails. I look after her, I write more emails, because it's just very hard, and Google doesn't tell me everything. We do music therapy with her. I take her horseback riding. But all of those services, I've had to ask other people. It's not easy to find. And because she's a child and not a lot of children with her needs, there's no, other than conductive education, if it wasn't for them, if I had have known about conductive education through March of Dimes, we'll say 7 years ago, I know that me and my daughter would be in a much better position because they understand. I can talk to them, and it's a support for both of us. So having come to March of Dimes has not only helped her, the conductive education has not only helped her, but me, and there's not many services out there for us. So that's I continue is to advocate and never give up, and don't ever let somebody tell you that you're never going to achieve something, because that little girl was never supposed to live, and there she is. And of all of this, I say advocate, because if it wasn't for her, I wouldn't have the nerves to be up here. And I get a lot of love and contentment. I've learned patience, understanding, dealing with her brain injury. So it's a path going forward, and it's nice to be here and hear other people, because I know that, you know, we're hitting the child stage, and then we're going to enter the adult stage, and services is different. So that's my main thing is never let anybody tell you you can't.
Thank you very much. I think a lot of kind of common themes that we've been hearing, and from the work over the last few years that I've done with folks in this field as well, is that recovery is not linear. No injury looks the same, and I think it's so important, like you said, to never give up hope, because even in the worst situation, you will always find people who know something more than you. You're always going to know something more than somebody else, and so you're going to be that help to somebody when they thought it wasn't going to get any better. So yeah, very, very well said. Just never stop trying. All right, well, I wasn't going to save myself for last, but we do have a few minutes, so I'll tell a little bit of my story as well. My name's Chloe, and kind of flew in here last minute, but I worked for Brain Injury Nova Scotia for the last few years before this fall. And my story, I mentioned really briefly earlier that I am a survivor. So it was about 7 years ago, 2016, I was riding my bike home. It was midnight, so not really surprising, I guess. But I got hit by a car on my bike, and I got taken to the hospital right away, and I had broken my neck in 2 places and had brain bleeds in the front right. And I don't remember this. It's all told secondhand to me. Yeah, but it was a really scary time. Not so much for me, but for my family and for my friends, because no one really knew right away what was going to happen. So right away I got put into surgery, and then I got put into a coma for a while, and it was kind of a wait and see what happens. And something that really resonated with me from Jeff's story, and from Steve's, I think, too, is the just not really believing that it can happen. And even in the worst times, when you first are kind of realizing what's going on, you still don't believe it. One of my first memories, which was probably about close to maybe 3 weeks after it actually happened, I was in the QE2 hospital, and I could hardly walk, and I have a buzzed head now. This is new, but at the time I had long, luscious locks, but I had a reverse lawnmower mohawk straight down the middle of my head from surgery. I had broken a lot of facial bones, so, just was not looking good. My eyes were shooting in opposite directions, and my mom took me to the washroom because she thought that when I saw myself for the first time in the mirror, I would freak out. And yeah, it's one of my first memories. I remember looking at myself in the mirror, but it was almost like, I've told this story a couple times, when you are going out with all your friends, you spend ages getting ready, you're looking good, you're looking hot, and you go out, you dance, you have a little too many drinks, and at some point during the night, you go to the washroom, and you're all sweaty, your makeup is halfway down your face, and you're like, ooh, I do not look like I did when I left the house tonight. That was the reaction that I had, seeing myself in the mirror. It wasn't a, oh my God, what happened? It was just like, oh, Chloe, you've looked better. You really let yourself go. So there was just a big part of me that I still, I had been told what happened, but I couldn't wrap my head around it. Anyway, so I spent about a month in the QE2, and then I got moved to the rehab in Halifax and spent another month there, and hearing a lot of the same things amongst all of us as well. Although there is, yes, I think we can all acknowledge, there's a shortage of resources and programs that exist, or maybe that we'd like to see in this province. However, the staff and the people that run these things and that offer what is here are amazing. My experience in the rehab and in the QE too, though I don't really remember it, was life-changing. I really feel like it set me on the right direction. Yeah, I had a really great experience. It was just really, it was the support that I needed in addition to the family that I'm lucky to have that lives close by. And then the hard part started was when I left rehab. I was living in the city by myself at the time, but they said, you can't do that anymore. You're not fit to care for yourself. So I had to move home with my parents who live in Wolfville, and I'm lucky that they're there and had the means to take me in. But that was when things got really hard, because when you're in the hospital, you're on a routine. You have a purpose. You go to physio. This is what you're doing. You're constantly getting told, yes, yes, yes. You're moving up, you're progressing. And then when I went home, suddenly everything came to a grinding halt. I couldn't work anymore. I just didn't have the ability to articulate myself. All the emotions that I didn't seem to have in the hospital suddenly came down in an avalanche, and I was not equipped to deal with that. I'm like, is any 22-year-old? I don't think so. So that was when things started to get hard, and I had just graduated university before this, and I was enrolled for more school later, and then I was told, you can't do that anymore. So yeah, like you guys said, suddenly it's, what is my purpose now? I was mourning the loss of my former self. And my biggest help through all this part of my recovery was asking for help. No one is a mind reader, and the hard part about brain injuries, especially concussion or traumatic brain injury, is that it's so oftentimes invisible. So, to all appearances, you don't need help, but really you do. So no one is a mind reader. You have to ask for it. You have to be an advocate, which we've all heard everyone say here so much. And what was really nice, though, is I think it's easy for us to think that you're going to be a burden to someone by asking, but people are really generous. I think like 98% of people do want to help. They're just waiting for somebody to ask. So I think that would probably be my biggest thing, is just put it out there. Set small goals, attainable goals, because you need something that's going to challenge you, but something that you can achieve. And then when you find those goals, start to ask for help. Start to tell people, hey, this is what I'm working on. This is what I want to do. I looked like a lunatic at first. When I moved back to the city, a lot of my friends had gone away. I was looking for friends. It's like dating. It's hard to meet people organically these days. When you're not in school. Suddenly, I was asking people left, right, and center, do you want to hang out? This is what I'm doing. Most people were receptive. Some people were like, who is this weird girl? But ask for help. I think that's honestly how I ended up where I am today. It's how I got the job with Brain Injury Nova Scotia. I just started school in the fall, and it's how I ended up in school. I got there with help from a lot of people. So I think my big advice and my big takeaway is just to put it out there. Don't stay quiet about it. Thank you very much. I'd love to open up for some questions, if anyone has, for anyone up here.
I just wanted to say on behalf of everyone, you guys are amazing. And I realize that it's significantly stressful to retell your stories. So I hope you know how much we appreciate it. My question is just along the lines of benefiting from helping other people. I wonder if Steve and Jeff, you could talk a bit about your experience as being one-to-one peer supporters.
Thanks very much for the question. To your point, I am volunteering as a one-to-one peer mentor, and it's just kind of a way for me to give back a little bit some of the things that I've taken away. So when I talk about peer support, I'm really standing on the shoulders of giants, so to speak. The people who've lived this in the past, they've figured out things on their own. They've learned things from the people before them, and that's where I'm benefiting. So if I can share some of what I've learned and experienced, it's kind of a way of giving back. Additionally, it's just part of the new me, I guess. I wouldn't have been volunteering certainly in this arena prior to my stroke, but now that I have this experience, it's something that I'm very happy to do, and it gives me a bit of a sense of belonging to a community as well. So, and it's a two-way street as well. I think I learn as much from those that I mentor, so to speak, as they learn from me. So it's been great, a great experience.
Just repeat what he said. He's a tough guy to follow. I think you said that about me before, but you're tougher than me. I enjoy and get probably, to be honest, get more back than I give out when I have an opportunity to talk with someone about what I went through when it helps them with what they're going through. I never would have expected that to be, but I know it to be. There was something else I had in my mind, but it kind of escaped me. So, thanks.
Thank you, too. Yeah, Peter, I'll come up to you.
Thank you. Back in the day, March 5th, 1968, was a real struggle because I was comatose for a while. But once I began to move around and discover life, there was something called Head On. And it was spoken to here a little bit. And I can't remember the years that it was, but when I first went there, it was like coming ashore after a long swim, realizing there were other people who had had a traumatic brain injury. And the question of a moment ago, because I can't remember names, when a person is reaching out to others, it helps the person doing the reaching out as well as the recipient. And for a while back in the first decade, I was involved with the Halifax chapter of the brain injury community on the executive. And I felt very good about that. And I still have lists of names of people who had needs. And fast forward to, it seems like 100 years later, on Mondays I work at Feed Nova Scotia in the rec warehouse. And on Thursday and Friday until very recently, but COSA, Circle of Support and Accountability, closed down here because of lack of funding, people who'd been incarcerated. And a person feels really good when they're listening. My father's phrase as a successful lawyer was that we learned to listen. He didn't have a brain injury, but as we listen to others, and I only have one good ear, as we listen to others, we benefit. And we think what we're going to say next, but as we listen to what they're saying. So it's very important, as was mentioned here just now, to serve the other. I guess my brain injury happened while I was in university. So I eventually completed the degree, but I didn't think that my brain injury was significant in 1968. So I tried to continue, and it took me twice as long to get the degree. But I think as we serve the other, it's a panacea for us as well as the people we're serving. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. We have a question from online.
Yes, thank you, Peter. I just want to reiterate, you guys are getting lots of praise and support from our online folks as well. There's lots of comments of support. There's also a question regarding the comment made about you look great. You must be doing great. And I think that is a common comment that a lot of people in the brain injury community receive. So do any of you have any advice for how to deal with that comment? When maybe on the inside you're not doing so well, but people assume you're doing great by the way you look.
That one, got a lot of swear words in my head for that. Does anyone else want to field that one?
Yeah, this recovery for me has been, we keep talking about the physical aspects, your gait, how you talk, can you raise your arm, but there's a brain here that's been injured. It's as much and sometimes more a mental injury as it is a physical injury. And the physical things, quite honestly, are relatively straightforward in how you approach them and how you treat them. You stretch this muscle, you do this, you do that. But the mental game can be much more challenging in that, I mentioned earlier, after the first year of recovery, the mental aspect of the injury I had started to take shape, started to get a handle on it, how to make it better, and I could see what things were helping. Sleep, good food, and exercise helped my mental game immensely, and now has really formed a new part of my life as I move forward, and I suspect will form that part in my life for the rest of my life. So.
As you were talking, Steve, I also was thinking on how I might answer that question. And I think a big one for me was because to all appearances, when I was in the worst of my recovery, to all appearances, I looked fine. And so even if people had been aware of my accident, they would be like, "Oh, you're good now, I can tell." But talking to everyone up here, no one in your recovery is putting in as much work as you. And so therefore, no one knows what you're going through. Nobody knows your boundaries and what your new limitations might be. And so unfortunately, that comes down onto you to create those boundaries. When you go into a social situation, or even with family, even with caregivers, things are changing all the time. So I think my advice and my suggestion would be is you have to put up those boundaries. No, someone may never understand, but when you enter the space together, you say, "This is what I need from you. I don't need to tell you why. All you need to know is that this is what I'm asking." If you can't respect that, then maybe we don't hang out right now, or maybe it's not the time for us. So I think for me, it was creating boundaries and being really strict about them. Because again, you put in the work, no one can know what it's like to be you. So it's one more piece of that advocacy work.
No, I was going to say something to, and you grabbed it, so I'm glad for that. Thank you, about the boundaries. And I'm constantly having to remind myself, the people who knew me before my brain injury still, and when I talked about performing before, they create that expectation. The invisible disability still is not being understood, and it doesn't matter. And they went through it with me. They knew that I was going through all this health care and that I will have it for the rest of my life. But the people who knew me before my brain damage still expect me to be that old person. So then I feel that I have to keep up with that performance, that I'm that person, and then it's exhausting and you've got to take the breaks. And I've had to keep learning to remind myself, I have to put those boundaries and say, I can't do this with you because you're not seeing me. The biggest problem was with my son. My son always thought I was like 10 feet tall, and then here I was dependent on other people and not being able to do so many things. And to this day, he will bring that up into conversation, that he still expects me to be a certain person and have a certain task or functionality that I don't have. And so I'm always constantly having to perform for my son as well. But it is exhausting. So I think that's what's harmed me from moving over to the other side and accepting my new self, in saying, no, this is who I am. So thank you for that reminder, Chloe, because the boundaries, I have to keep reminding myself that I have to keep reminding people, excuse me, I'm a person with invisible disabilities. I have limitations. I need you to accept them or not at all. So thank you for that, because we don't talk about that enough either. Do you know what I mean? But I wish I didn't have to keep performing. It gets exhausting.
Yeah, we'll go, we'll just have time for one more and then we're going to wrap up.
I come at it from a totally different angle, okay? Charles is in a wheelchair. He is difficult to understand. He has to be fed through a tube. He can't eat. But cognitively, he is 90%. Okay, he's a chartered accountant. He's still doing tax returns. He's doing all that. But when we are out, he's a chair. He is not a person. And so it's a totally different barrier that we have to go through, and it hurts just as much. Thank you. I just wanted to say that. It's, you know. He actually did a video for med students for Dalhousie, and it was, I cried through it actually, because his last comment was that you know, the doctors are saying, what do you want? And he said, respect. And I think that's what everybody deserves with their challenges, whatever they may be. Thank you.